Hello everyone, my name is Jeff Scott. I am a French hornist, educator, and composer based in Ohio. Currently, I am the new professor of French horn at Oberlin Conservatory. Prior to that, and that's just, like crazy, but prior to that, it was all Imani all the time. And before I get into my video here, I first want to say thank you to the team at Composers Now, Impact Artists, for creating this format for us to present our music as composers. Especially though, Amy Frawley and my true mentor in music, Tanya Leone, the impact that she, talking about impact, the impact that she had on my life, she probably doesn't even know, but she gave me really my first foray into working in the field in New York City. Tanya was the conductor at Brooklyn College when I was doing my doctoral study, and they needed a fourth horn in the Harlem Dance Theater ballet company in the orchestra, and somehow, some way, she managed to sneak me into that orchestra. That just turned into so many other wonderful opportunities, getting into especially that type of work in New York City. It's a very coveted style of work. But in any case, thank you, Amy, thank you, Tanya, and thank everyone at Composers Now. I never really wanted to be a classical musician. I actually wanted to be a baseball player. Above everything, I wanted to play for the New York Yankees. I wanted to be Reggie Jackson. And yeah, that didn't work out. But my second choice was I wanted to be a cartoonist. I wanted to draw Marvel comics and superheroes. Third came music, and I have to admit, when I auditioned to go to music school, I at the same time was auditioning for art school in New York City, Pratt, and other places. I also took tryouts for baseball, St. John's, and I auditioned at Juilliard, Madison, Manhattan School of Music, all New York-based schools. And I decided, and I told my mom that I would go study wherever I got the best scholarship to study to just offset the cost. Because even then I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew it was going to be one of those three things. I started composing though at an early age. I started composing, I must have been 7 or 8 years old, writing out little melodies, not even writing them out, like writing lyrics, that's the word. Writing lyrics and singing the songs. As I learned how to actually notate music, I took a theory and so forth in prep division as a teenager. I then would sort of score out melodies, tunes by hand, and play them on my horn. And I had a whole thick book of these songs. Some were completely fleshed out with the chords and everything. Some had scored out for types of bands and everything. I never really got to doing much with them, but I still have that book. Look that up. But in any case, I turned that into an interest in orchestrating. When I did my master's study, I took an orchestration class with a fellow by the name of Jacques Lessard. Professor Lessard really impressed upon us the knowledge of all of the instruments in the orchestra, and understanding how they work, and how you would score for them. And so what he would do is he would take classical pieces like Mozart piano sonatas, Beethoven piano sonatas, so forth, and we had to orchestrate those for various types of orchestra. So Mozart orchestra, romantic orchestra, contemporary orchestra, as we learned the various instruments. And that really was the training, if you will say, that I got in not even composing, just orchestrating and understanding how the instruments work. Later, when I was out of school, I started playing in this all brass and percussion jazz and funk band called No No Nanette. Two of the members, Rob Sussman, trombonist, and Glenn Makos, a trumpet player, they were amazing composers. It was a 9-piece group, very odd instrumentation, and there was no music written for it. So everybody in the group either arranged or composed, and these guys were bringing in fresh stuff all the time. And I got to hear how they scored, for these instruments. It was really there that I cut my teeth because everybody contributed, and I got a lot of pressure. Hey, Jeff, do something. I started out with arranging a couple of things, and then I started writing some original pieces and started to get feedback on how I could improve, especially from Rob and Glenn. But then, truly, honestly, I cut my teeth in Imani Winds. I was a member of the internationally acclaimed quintet Imani Winds for 24 years. Original member, just retired this summer. But that was my lab band. That was where I got to bring in sketches, even if it was just 10 bars of music, and I could hear it and see how the colors of the combinations of instruments and revoicing of chords and everything. I got to hear it live with the best musicians in the country and get feedback from them, then come back 2 days later with a new fresh set of 10 bars, and that's where I really learned my stuff. And also, I had Valerie Coleman in the band. So, Valerie's bringing in, if you don't know Valerie, I'm sorry for you. But anyways, Valerie was bringing all this incredible music, composing all this stuff, and it just, all you had to do is listen, and you heard mastery, the beginning of mastery was. In any case, that was really where I learned how to do some really good composing. And it also was the opportunity for my works to be presented on the main stage. And as a composer, there's just nothing more valuable than getting feedback from great musicians and then having your music performed by great musicians. So that turned into just more writing, people then asking to purchase the scores, then slowly getting one commission here, one commission there, and then expanding out. I was truly blessed in that regard because I didn't have the formal training of studying composition. My style of composing includes so much of just what I grew up in. I grew up in New York City, in Queens, and in Brooklyn. And if you grow up in the boroughs of New York, people who have done this know this, you grow up a little bit Jewish, a little bit Puerto Rican, you're a little bit Italian, you're a little bit African American, you're a little bit of everything, because all of these cultures do this. They mix in New York City. You can't help but mix. You can't help but be influenced by the food, by the culture, but by the languages. You just can't help it. And so my music is influenced by it. And I call my music urban classical music because it's classically based, but influenced by an urban environment. And so it's very common for me to write, score in R&B stylings in my music. It's very common to have African, Afro-Cuban. It's the drum beat that I heard in my life as I walked the streets of Bedford-Stuyvesant or Far Rockaway, Queens. It's just there. And so it shows up in my music everywhere. One thing I learned very early on as a composer, arranger and composer, was that it's real important to have musicians, surround yourself with musicians that can speak the same language you speak. And what I mean by that is, if you're writing music that speaks to a certain style or requires a certain influence from a third culture or something like that, and those musicians maybe don't exist. Say you're writing in an Afro-Cuban style or klezmer style or something like that, and you're not around musicians that are from that genre, you really need to surround yourself with musicians that have sensitivity to it. I'm spoiled in that regard with Imani Winds because of all the great collaborations that we've done with just countless greats, true masters in their genre of music. Has really afforded us that sensibility that I'm talking about. But then the collaborations that we've had have allowed me to be on the same side of some of the finest musicians. And you get spoiled in that regard. And so you know that, those types of musicians exist. We call it, in my circle, we call them 21st century musicians. It's those people that you know that you can put anything in front of them and give them a couple of minutes and they can just sound so convincing in the style. I think it's real important that you find people that can speak that voice for you, because your music relies on that, that it's conveyed and it's close to the voice that you could speak. It deserves that and needs that. The two examples, well, the first example that I'll demonstrate comes from a collaboration that Imani Winds did with really three other forces. The piece is entitled Passion for Bach and Coltrane. And I do mean J.S. Bach and John Coltrane. The oboe player in Imani Winds, Toyin Spellman Diaz, her dad, A.B. Spellman, is an amazing poet, published poet. And he wrote this set of poetry entitled Things I Must Have Known. Gave everyone in the wind quintet a copy of it when it was published. And I promptly put that copy on my shelf somewhere, and it sat for about 2 or 3 years. True story. Sorry. But I wanted to do some summer reading, and I was also looking for some inspiration for possibly composing some music. And I pulled this book of poetry off the shelf, and I got to about the 4th poem in the book and immediately had to contact A.B. Spellman. And I sent him an email and I said, A.B., we have to collaborate. I just read after 3 years or so, just read this poetry, and it's incredible. It's singing to me, it's talking to me, it's screaming for me to do something with it musically. And he said, well, let's do it. Well, tell me what you're thinking. It talks very profoundly about religion and about the passion of Christ. It talks very profoundly about life and death and the fragility of it. And it also talks about being your own person. So much of who A.B. Spellman is. And it just spoke to me musically because he comes from a jazz background. He was actually a jazz critic for many, many years. And the beat of the poetry just sort of like, it has that urban feel to it. You'll see what I'm talking about. In any case, he also has a real sort of affection for a pianist still living by the last name of Rubalcaba, Gonzalo Rubalcaba, and just an incredible jazz pianist. And the movement of this piece that I'm going to put on for you to listen is a movement dedicated to Rubalcaba, and really speaks to that musician that touches near perfection, to the point where you don't even want the room or anything about it to rustle, because you're experiencing this thing that's very special in the moment. And the poetry talks about how special it is because this amazing pianist, creates this moment. And I tried to create that moment in the music itself. The whole piece, The Passion, is actually an hour and a half long. And I know it sounds like a lot, but we've performed that piece many, many times. It is a complete evening's length piece. This particular movement is, I'd say, 16, 17 minutes. So I'd say get a scotch or something and enjoy this movement. It's entitled A Hug for Gonzalo.
Among the things I must have known but have now forgotten is the skill of waiting. The room looks beaten, used, abused, as a good jazz club should. Voices unattached, wafted away from the discipline of words to feed my agitation. There is a vague music on the sound system. It does not help me. My seat hardens, I squirm, I wait. Art will be here soon. Gonzalo is at the piano, a small, sturdy man, all in black in the muted haze. I think he is shy and will not speak all evening except to name his bass and drum. His first chords fold back into themselves, spare and new, abjuring the metronome. He knows we know his flash and wants us to learn his silence. I knew he would throw it. All those years of churney wrapped in salsa inside bebop swing him beyond convention. Swift families of notes sprint by in hard rhythms. Right hand throwing threes, left hand crushing twos and fours. I spot a candle through my neighbor's gin. Its glow falls down with the blues. Bud Powell knows you, Gonzalo. Some restless djinn inside the crowd cannot abide soft and slow. It sounds like opportunity to them. The conversationalists confuse quietude with vacancy and rush to fill this new reflection Rubalcaba values so. They drop their mutter into the deep blue rest he has made for us, a vitiation of a moment as close to sacred as I know the way to. And I must now listen through their voices to his invocation. But the song, how much for the song? Thoughts so tender they can only be sung. Rhyme in the nursery said at the bottom of my father's voice, in the last sweet instant before sleep. That song, how much for it? Long, slow, unpunctuated lines drift on the barest breath. How much, the whispers break through, for the goddamn song?
Speaking again about surrounding yourself with great musicians, Acropolis Reed Quintet, like from what galaxy did these musicians come from? If you don't know who Acropolis Reed Quintet is, just Google it. Stop, push, pause, and Google and find out. Just, I was talking earlier about 21st century musicians, people that just have a sensibility and a flexibility in music, and the thing is keen to it is they listen, they do their homework, and whatever they didn't get in conservatory, which we all know sometimes can be lacking in covering many different styles, they didn't use that as a crutch. They just went out and investigated and researched and experimented and filled themselves with as much music as they could and styles that they could. And so when the opportunity came for me to write something for them, they came wanting a commission, and they said, the Detroit based, and they said, would you come up to Detroit? We're actually doing a collaboration with the Charles Wright Museum, African American Museum, and we'd love to do something that's based on one of the installations there. Maybe if you come through and you take a tour through the museum with us, maybe you'd find something that would be inspirational for you. Now, to be really frank, we're talking about an all Caucasian ensemble, and I'm going as an African American composer to an African American museum that's telling the history of Detroit, And if you know anything about the history of Detroit and Motown and, jazz and so on, I'm thinking, okay, and I didn't really know them that well at the point. I said, well, let's do it. Let's go, let's go. And I left there saying, well, guys, I'm thinking I'm going to do something about Paradise Valley and Black Bottom, Detroit, from the 40s and 50s when there was this huge jazz scene. And they were game. And I said, well, here we go. Here we go, And I just had no idea what I was dealing with. This ensemble, man. Oh, my goodness. Anyways, accolades. I can go on and on and on. You'll hear it for yourself. The collaboration turned into a commission entitled Homage to Paradise Valley. And it speaks to this period of time from really sort of the late 40s until the very early 60s, where in Paradise Valley, Detroit, which is a little suburb, right next to another little suburb, which was entitled Black Bottom, where there was just an incredible African-American neighborhood culture, just thriving community that was not just about jazz clubs, but all Black-owned businesses, pharmacies, banks, supermarkets, shoes, you name it. It was just a thriving community that also hosted some of the most famous jazz clubs of the era. Every jazz musician of note made it through Paradise Valley and Black Bottom, Detroit, eventually. And the famed Orchestra Hall, which houses the Detroit Symphony Orchestra, at one point actually closed down and reopened as a jazz club for a period of, I think it was about 11 years. And this is where a lot of famous jazz musicians would come and imagine that great hall. That neighborhood was raised, R-A-Z-E-D, raised, for urban renewal and highways. No longer exists. I suggest if you want to know more about it, just Google it. It'll come up. But we wanted to do a piece that spoke to that. And so this piece, Homage to Paradise Valley, in 4 movements, really spoke to the spirit of the people that once lived there and thrived there. It speaks to the style of music that one might hear if they were thumping around the area at night, going to one of the jazz clubs. And it also speaks to the shoulders that I stand on as an African American composer, being able to tell the story in my own voice through music, and getting paid for it. What's that about? Try doing that in 1940. It meant a lot, not only to have this collaboration, but to have the platform to write a big commission and really dive in to all the different sounds and genres that I wanted to get into. Acropolis just completely kills it. It's just a fantastic performance, and here it is, Homage to Paradise Valley. I have to say I got real lucky as a young person studying. I had a lot of influences that were sort of pulling at me. I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to be a baseball player. I had no interest in music. But I had some talent in music, and my middle school band director, I guess we actually call that elementary in Queens. It was my elementary school band director, Mr. Orifice, James Orifice. He saw some talent in me. I was playing on the horn, and through a bunch of channels, I ended up getting some help to get theory classes and lessons at a pre-college division in Brooklyn College. But the true gift in all of that was that when that scholarship for those studies at Brooklyn College ran out, the horn teacher that I had, Carolyn Clark, she just decided she was going to continue teaching me through high school, knowing I had no money to pay. She just continued to teach me for free until I got into conservatory or wherever I was going to go. So you can't pay that back, so you pay it forward. That is the true situation where you pay it forward. So thank you, Carol. I'm certainly the musician I am today because of all the patience that you had with me as a knucklehead 13-year-old. Thank you very much for listening to these musical examples. I think they really do speak to my voice in composition. And if you're interested in knowing more, hearing more, you can just go to my website. It's musicbyjeffreyscott.com. Some really cool things coming up soon, including a premiere with the Detroit Symphony Orchestra in November. But I thank you for listening. It's been a true pleasure to have this format to share my music. And thank you, Amy. Thank you, Tanya.